Sometimes when you open your eyes, the world has changed. The familiar paths have disappeared. The familiar voices are silent. At that moment, will you wait to be rescued or will you make your own way?
As the first rays of the sun touched the surface of an unfamiliar forest, Gale's eyes slowly opened. The morning breeze caressed his fur, but the emptiness inside him was even colder than the wind. He lifted his head, looked around. This was not the forest he knew. He sniffed the air for a familiar scent, but there was nothing. He searched for the scent of his family, his flock, but in vain. What was he supposed to do? There was no way back. He was tired. He was hungry. But worst of all, he was alone.
Sometimes the hardest thing is to take the first step.
He took a deep breath and put his paws on the ground. He had to go. Gale was moving slowly. His stomach was empty, his mind clouded. Hunger haunted him like a shadow. A slight rumbling in his stomach reminded him that he had to survive. But how? He had never hunted before. His family had always brought him food. But now, he was alone. Just then, his eyes caught movement, a rabbit in the bushes. Small, weak but a big enough meal. Gale took a step, then another step. But his breathing quickened, his heart was racing. A rabbit. Like the rabbit that crossed the river and disappeared. And in that moment, everything came to life in his mind. The moment when he is separated from his flock. Storm, river, current, disappearance. His paws were fixed to the ground. He couldn't move.
Sometimes your past is the biggest obstacle. If what you ran away from is still haunting you, can you ever be truly free?
The rabbit looked up at him, and it shot off like an arrow. Gale, in a moment of reflex, wanted to dash after him, but he couldn't. Gale froze in place as the rabbit quickly disappeared.
Some shadows are in our minds.
Gale took a deep breath. He could not go hungry. He had to find easier prey. And there, a little lizard. It was motionless. It was easy to approach. He had a chance. This time he wouldn't make a mistake. Gale held his breath, tensed his muscles. He prepared to attack. And just as he was about to jump, his paws slipped. What he thought he had stepped on was actually a slippery piece of stone. He lost his balance and he fell in the mud. In the blink of an eye, the lizard escaped between the rocks. And as Gale lifted his head out of the mud, a heron looked at Gale a few meters away. After a few seconds of eye-to-eye gaze, the heron dipped its beak into the water and caught itself breakfast. Gale came out of the mud with a stupid feeling. But worse, he's still hungry.
Sometimes the worst thing is not missing the hunt. It's not even trying.
Gale refocused. Even though he had failed, he had no choice but to try. This time he did not choose his prey. The prey was already eating in front of him. A fox had hunted a small bird and was enjoying its meal. Gale approached cautiously. Maybe a piece would fall. Maybe the fox would share what was left. But just when you take a step, the fox suddenly looked up, his eyes locked on Gale. They remained motionless for a few seconds, and then, the fox is in attack position. Gale took a step back, but that was not enough. The fox lunged at Gale. Gale ran backwards in panic. The fox chased him away. His heart was beating like crazy. For the first time, he was the prey. Finally, Gale stopped at the edge of the river. The fox was not behind him, but Gale's hungry again. And he didn't know what to do.
If you are the hunter, you hunt. If you are the prey, you run away. What if you are caught in the middle?
Gale bowed his head. There was no food today either. But he couldn't give up, because of Ulf. No matter how hungry, will not give up. His steps were now heavy, his breathing erratic. He was dizzy with hunger. His paws trembled, his body rebelled with every step. He had been wandering in the forest for days, hungry and tired. Right in front of him, he saw a squirrel coming fast down from a tree. Gale instinctively wanted to attack, but his legs were immobilized. Without even noticing him, the squirrel jumped from branch to branch, leapt onto a rock and quickly disappeared. If Gale was agile like a squirrel, if he wasn't tired, if he was stronger, but he couldn't do anything.
Sometimes the greatest battle is not lost on the field, but within.
He had no strength to take another step. There was a big rock in front of him. He approached slowly, crouched down, and tried to rest. For the first time, he was really scared. Night began to fall fast. The forest began to make different sounds in the darkness. Little rustles in the bushes sounded like unknown whispers. It was the first time he would sleep alone. And when he closed his eyes, nothing happened. He couldn't sleep. The fear was even stronger than the gnawing hunger.
The darkness brings your deepest fears to the surface, but loneliness is the heaviest.
Gale climbed up on the rock, thinking his parents must be looking for him. He looked at the sky. He saw the moonlight. He took a deep breath and tried to howl, but he was silent. He tried one more time, and once again. But no matter how hard he tried, nothing came out except a weak, muffled sound. Somewhere far away, real wolves were howling, but they would not hear his.
You want to be heard, but there is no voice in the forest that resonates for lone wolves.
Gale bowed his head. He had lost this battle too. His mind was still fighting, but his body had reached its limit. His eyelids grew heavy as fatigue. Hunger and despair gnawed at him. He looked up at the sky one last time, but his eyes were heavy. He was tired. He was desperate, and he gave into the night and collapsed there.
When your body gets tired, your mind wants to keep going, but sometimes the hardest thing is to stay standing.
A sharp scream. Gale quickly opened his eyes. For a few seconds, he tried to remember where he was. His breathing was erratic. His muscles were still tired. But the sense of danger was stronger than anything else. He pricked up his ears. He examined his surroundings, and he saw him. In the sky, a hunter was chasing his prey. Gale squinted, watching two shadows hovering in the air. A hawk and a raven, one the consummate hunter, the other a fugitive fighting for survival. The raven was trying to keep its distance from the hawk with sharp turns. It hovered like a shadow in the air, defending itself with sudden moves. But the hawk wasn't giving up either. It stretched its wings and accelerated, making its attacks even harder. Something inside Gale stirred. His whole body tensed.
Those born to survive don't give up. What about you?
It was a struggle. You're either the prey or the hunter. The raven tumbled through the air, dodging from branch to branch. The hawk swooped low, waiting for its opportunity. The battle in the air transcended the boundaries of the forest and was imprinted in Gale's mind. I must not give up. All this running away was for survival. The raven was fighting for his life. Just like Gale, I must survive. While his eyes watched the battle between the hawk and the raven, his mind was focused on hunting. He had to be a hunter too. I must learn to hunt. The raven made a sudden change of direction, but the hawk swooped down like lightning and struck it. The raven shook as if it had lost its wings, did a few somersaults in the air, and fell hard to the ground. Gale gasped as the sound of the fall echoed through the forest.
Now, are you the hunter, or are you still the prey?
Without even thinking, he started to approach slowly. Now he was the hunter. Gale took a deep breath. There was a strange feeling inside him. He was burning with hunger, his muscles tired but alert. His eyes locked on the opportunity in front of him. Prey. He was there. A few steps away, a raven, with its big black feathers, cowered among the roots. Its wing was bleeding, its feathers disheveled. Its beak was slightly ajar, as if even breathing was difficult, but he was still alive. Gale took a silent step. Raven raised his head, his eyes fixed on Gale, but he didn't move. Gale's instincts kicked in. One more step. One more step. He brought his face a little closer. He could feel her heartbeat. All that stood between him and her were a few dry leaves and a thin distance. Raven remained motionless, panting, not taking his eyes off Gale. At that moment, a voice echoed inside Gale. Is it that easy? His mind was fighting a war against his hunger. And now, would it be so simple to hunt him down? But the raven did not blink.
Sometimes the greatest battle is fought not with swords, but with the mind. Gale resisted hunger. He got tired, but he didn't give up. he learned to survive, but now, she faces her own biggest obstacle. Well, if a wolf can't become a hunter, what happens? Some answers come with time, some wounds bleed prematurely, but one thing is certain, the journey is not over yet, and sometimes, it is not fate but necessity that chooses your companions.
No pack, no food, no hope, but must survive.